I've said before that I felt the 2013 NFL draft reminded me somewhat of the 2011 draft, and I also think it reminds me some of the 2008 draft as well. 2008 in the sense that teams didn't really feel there was a true clear-cut franchise quarterback worth taking number one overall, so as a result, Matt Ryan ended up going third to the Falcons. Now, in 2011, you ended up having four quarterbacks going in the first 12 picks. You had Cam Newton go number one to Carolina, Jake Locker 8 to Tennessee, you had Blaine Gabbert go 10 to Jacksonville, and then Christian Ponder going 12 to Minnesota. And it was one of those drafts where you could have kind of argued that there wasn't really a clear-cut number one player, even though I did feel that Cam Newton was that number one player. And I think by the time he got to the draft, it was a general consensus or close to it that Cam Newton was worth the number one overall pick. But you had the quarterbacks like the Lockers and the Gabberts and the Ponders that people saw talent in, but they also had significant questions. And with teams, so many of them having quarterback needs, they ended up maybe reaching on these quarterbacks a little bit higher than they should have, but you could also maybe have justified the picks because they had a lot of upside to them. Well, when I look at this 2013 NFL draft, I kind of see a similar type quarterback class. Guys like Geno Smith and Matt Barkley and E.J. Manuel and Ryan Nassib and on and on. I see quarterbacks that I could make the argument should go in the first round, but maybe if teams took them in the first, especially in the case of like Nassib or Manuel, if they took them maybe in the first 15 to 18 picks, I would say, you're reaching probably a little bit here. But the bottom line is there are quarterbacks that I think do have significant upside to them, but they also have significant questions. Which brings me to the person that is most widely viewed, at least at this point, as the number one prospect in this 2013 quarterback class, and that is Geno Smith. And it sure looks like that Geno's going to go in the top 10, probably in the top 5, and I've been mocking him the past couple of times to the Jacksonville Jaguars with the second overall selection. But with that being said, there are a lot of questions with Geno, and I think the most important question to answer of all is, will Geno Smith become a franchise NFL quarterback? Now, I will admit, I am a fan of Geno Smith. And part of the reason I am is because there were plenty of things I saw the last 2 years at West Virginia that I liked out of his game. I think he has very good accuracy in the short and intermediate range, let's say from 0 to 15 yards. I really think he does. Now, some may say that's that spread option system that puts him in those situations to make a lot of easy throws, but the bottom line is not every throw he made was easy. I saw plenty of throws that were, into tight spaces at the college level in the 10 to 15 yard range that he completed and threw the ball in the right spot, put it where the receivers had the best chance to make an athletic play with it. And that was very impressive to me. I also like the fact that similar to RG3 last year, I thought Geno Smith threw a great deep ball. Maybe not with the same velocity, obviously, as RG3, but I thought he had a similar level of touch. It was really impressive to me when I'd see him throw over the top to Austin or Stedman Bailey. He really threw a nice deep ball. And he made a lot of big plays in the passing game with his accuracy with the deep ball. I also look at Geno Smith and I see a guy, many people say what they want about the spread and spread option systems at the college level, but you do have to have some type of mental aptitude for the game. And it's not as easy as we may make it seem. And Geno Smith seemed to have a decent grasp on what he was doing. And at times he demonstrated the ability to me to understand defenses, make changes if necessary, and go through his first, second, and even third reads. That's something he's going to have to do at the NFL level, and I saw him do it at times in college. And one thing that I think is a little underrated when it comes to Geno Smith is he is a very good athlete. And I think sometimes what happens maybe is Geno doesn't want to be known as a run-first quarterback. He wants to stay away from that black quarterback stereotype, and I get that, and I understand that. But I do think that maybe exploring his athleticism a little bit more, maybe running a little bit more, extending plays more with his feet, maybe running a little bit more for first downs, could open up things that much more for him in the passing game at the NFL level. He should take advantage of that God-given athleticism and do something with it because it could expand his horizons and his possibilities as an NFL starting quarterback. Now, on the flip side, there are plenty of positives I see in Geno Smith's games, but there are also some very big negatives. And I've watched every game of his the past couple of years. And one thing I've noticed at times is on those 10 to 15 yard outs, let's say, those throws that you have to be able to make at the NFL level, at times I saw his ball float on him a little bit. his ball lacked zip. And what I mean by zip is that elite NFL arm strength. I don't think Geno has, I think he has a strong enough arm to be an NFL starting quarterback. But if you're going to want him to make that tight 15-yard out, or you want him to throw that 20-yard post, and you want him to be able to throw it on a rope, that's not the type of quarterback he is. He's going to have to be able to move safeties with his eyes, and he's going to have to use timing more than actual sheer velocity. So there are times in the NFL where you have to make those type of into a tight spot throws, and Geno may struggle with that a little bit. Now, he does also have a tendency, and you saw this in some of the bad games he had this year, whether that be Texas Tech or Kansas State. He had a tendency when things kind of got bad. When things are great, Geno's great. He is that guy that looks like a franchise quarterback. But when things are bad, he has that tendency to lock on that first target. He kind of gets overwhelmed a little bit by the game, and he just kind of freezes up and limits his possibilities, if is the best way I could put it. And that tendency to lock on the first target, if you do that consistently in the NFL, you're going to get picked off over and over and over again. And one more thing that concerns me a lot about Geno Smith, and maybe is my most concerning thing of all, it's not the physical part, it's the mentality. And what I mean by the mentality is he seems to be a guy, and I've seen it on Twitter, etc., that seems to be very distracted by what other people are saying. He seems to be very concerned with how he is perceived. He seems to be very concerned with wanting to do this and wanting to do that. And at times I think he could get very frustrated at the NFL level. And if things don't go the way that he may envision or the way he may want to, is he going to mentally implode? Is he going to collapse? Is he going to fold up like a tent? Like you saw maybe a little bit in the second half of his 2012 season at West Virginia. I mean, West Virginia started off like gangbusters. That offense looked like one of the very best in the country. And then the second half of the season started, and it was an entirely different ball game for him. And I'm just concerned that if he gets to the NFL level, gets under that NFL microscope, with that NFL media focus and the pressure of being an NFL starting quarterback, could it be too much for Geno Smith to handle? I have some legitimate concerns about that. In recent years in the NFL, we've seen quarterbacks out of spread systems and out of spread option systems be drafted higher. And whether that be the guys like the Sam Bradfords or the Blaine Gabberts or the Cam Newtons or the Vince Youngs or even a guy in the second round out of Nevada a couple of years ago like Colin Kaepernick. You know, you kind of had a mixed bag. You know, you've had the quarterbacks like Bradford who have moments where they look good and other moments where they look a bit overwhelmed. You have guys like Blaine Gabbert who, you know, kind of similar to Geno Smith in a way, played in a wide open spread system that was meant to mask some shortcomings, if you will. And the guys like Gabbert have really struggled to transition to the speed of the NFL game and to the NFL level in general. Bradford, you know, the book's still to be written. The jury's still out on whether or not he's going to be a franchise quarterback. And things definitely don't look good for Blaine Gabbert right now. When you look at a guy like Cam Newton, he looks like he could be a franchise NFL quarterback. He looks like he's going to be. But there are still some questions about maturity and focus and, you know, those type of things. When you look at Colin Kaepernick, he's a guy that looks like he has a lot going for him. It looks like he could be a franchise NFL quarterback too. But at one point in time, I was saying the same things about Vince Young, as he had a lot going for him. I thought he had a strong arm. Yeah, he had a long delivery, but he was a great athlete, and he seemed to be tough and be a leader and a winner coming from that program in Texas where he won a national title. He seemed to have a lot going for him. But some of the questions I have about Geno Smith in terms of mentality and in particular maybe maturity, you know, manifested in Vince Young. And we saw what ended up happening to VY. A potentially great career was derailed in large part due to his own stupidity. Yeah, Jeff Fisher's handling of him wasn't exactly the greatest either, but a lot of that falls on VY's shoulders. So I think a lot of what's going to happen with Geno Smith is ultimately going to come down to whether or not teams view him as a guy like a Cam Newton or a Colin Kaepernick, or if they're afraid he's going to turn into a Vince Young, if they think he could be like a Sam Bradford, or if they think he's a Blaine Gabbert again. I mean, there's going to be a lot of questions, and it's going to be very important whatever team does draft him in the first round, that they build a team around Geno Smith that is meant to accentuate his positives and kind of mask and hide some of his negatives, especially early on in his career. You know, let him focus on one or two things and make sure he does those very well and gets as perfect as he can at those before he starts worrying about getting too fancy and da-da-da. Don't overwhelm him, and he might be okay. When I look at Geno Smith, the closest player comparison I can come up with, it's not like Vince Young, even though I see some elements there. It's not a Blaine Gabbert, even though I see some elements there. It's probably somewhere along the lines of a Jake Locker, a guy at Washington who was a multi-year starter at that program, who some people think underachieved. I don't think Geno Smith underachieved quite as much as Jake Locker did, but Jake Locker was a guy that had athleticism that people thought could make all the NFL throws, even though he lacked elite arm strength. But sometimes there were questions there about his consistency and some other things, and it seems to be very similar with Geno Smith. Now, the whole point of this video was to address whether or not I felt Geno Smith is a franchise NFL quarterback. Now, you're saying I'm comparing him to Jake Locker, and that means automatically that he's not. Well, the book is still to be written on Jake Locker, to be fair. Now, when I look at Geno Smith, though, I just have a feeling that he will be a franchise NFL quarterback, depending upon getting him in the right situation. Now, if he's taken with by the Jacksonville Jaguars with the 2nd overall pick, I'm not sure if that's necessarily the best situation for him. Maybe a Philadelphia is the best situation for him, or perhaps a Buffalo is under new coach Doug Marrone. Arizona, I think, would be a great fit under Bruce Arians. I really do. If he gets taken by the Jets for some reason, oh, God bless you, Geno, and good luck to you. So I think he can be a franchise NFL quarterback. So I look at those positives. I look at a guy that's big enough to play the position. I look at the guy with a very good accuracy in the short and intermediate range. A guy that can throw a really good deep ball, meaning he'll be able to vertically stretch out opposing NFL defenses, as well as horizontally stretching them out as well. I look at a guy whose athleticism could come into play more than NFL teams may realize. And this is a guy who did put up some big numbers ultimately at West Virginia. Yeah, he had a lot of talent around him, but he's a talent in and of himself. I think it's going to be critical that he gets with the team that knows what they're doing, with a coach that knows how to handle a young quarterback, that ultimately builds a team around Geno Smith and his strengths and helps mask some of his weaknesses until he can become better at them. But if I was a team in the top 5, and I needed a quarterback, would I take Geno Smith? And would I feel that he could become a franchise NFL quarterback? The ultimate answer is yes.